part of this budget is the outlook on disinvestment. The target for this financial year, the next financial year, is 1.75 lakh crore rupees, with the assurance that big companies, big public sector companies like Air India, etc., will complete its disinvestment process this year. They're also looking at completing the LIC IPO. Now, the NITI AAYOG has been tasked with preparing a fresh list of public sector enterprises which could be privatized. And speaking to me on the budget as well as the disinvestment plan is now CEO of the NITI AAYOG, Mr. Amitabh Kant. Mr. Kant, welcome and thank you for speaking with ET now. Let me begin with your overall take on Budget 2021. Has it really delivered in the expectation that it will be a vaccine for growth? Is it the kind of budget which delivers a booster shot in a post-pandemic year?
First and foremost, this is firstly a budget which doesn't look at merely, accelerating growth for this year. This is not a budget for this financial year, but it's actually a budget for the next 4 to 5 years, because it lays down really the key principles within which government will operate. And that is that it continues the process of disinvestment. It lays a huge focus on monetization. It talks about opening up FDI and insurance. It cuts down, it talks about banks getting privatized, insurance companies getting privatized, and therefore it lays a very clear trajectory. And secondly, it doesn't distort anything. And what is very important in a COVID year is for a budget not to do anything damaging. So it's a very pragmatic, it's a very practical, it's a very rational budget, because it doesn't put in additional cesses, it doesn't put in additional taxes, brings sensibility to the budget making process. And thirdly, I think on the tax side, by doing away with anti-dumping duties and by doing away with distortions on raw material and intermediate goods, it'll make goods cheaper for the MSMEs. It'll make raw material and intermediates extremely cheap, and that'll benefit MSMEs in a very big way. And, eventually end up creating employment in the country. But my big thing about the budget is that it really focuses heavily on infrastructure. The capital expenditure goes up by 34-35%, but it talks at length on infrastructure. And my belief is that infrastructure is really the way forward. And secondly, because private sector investment is still shy, pushing out brownfield investments and privatizing them across rail, across roads, across warehouses, across sports stadiums, across warehouse. All this will bring in private sector, and they in turn will bring in debt along with them. And that is the best way to kickstart really for accelerated growth in the coming years.
Let's come back to the disinvestment program. Is the 1.7 lakh crore rupee target, lesser than last year's, more realistic in your view? And what are the fresh candidates for disinvestment that you at the NITI AAYOG will identify over time? Also, if you can share with us, which are the 2 public sector banks which are in queue for privatization? So
that bit of homework will be done by NITI, but broadly on the strategic sector side, there are 4 strategic areas which will remain. The government's objective is that atomic energy, space and defense, transport and telecom, power, petroleum, coal and mining, and banking, insurance and financial services are 4 strategic sectors in which there should be 3 to 4 public sectors, either by amalgamating or by keeping just 3 or 4. But in all other areas, government should get out of businesses, and all other areas we should not have public sector. So we will get down to this business of making specific recommendations as early as possible. We've done our homework, and you'll have a fairly quick roadmap from us. As you are aware, we've not been shy of this. We've made a huge number of recommendations on the disinvestment, and a large number of public sector companies are actually presently undergoing that process of are at a very advanced stage of disinvestment.
What about the track record of disinvestment so far? There hasn't been much movement in the last year, even though markets were doing spectacularly, and many have asked, what were we waiting for? How do we ensure that we don't face these challenges ahead?
First is, I think I've been discussing this with Secretary Deepam, and his view was that, one must be very clear that that we've been through this process of COVID, the process of disinvesting government assets. You need to go through processes, you need to go through several committees, you need to, you are selling companies, large companies, like you're selling BPCL, you're selling Concor, you're selling Air India. If you mess up on the processes, and that is where in government we tend to make mistakes, and then you get a lot of allegations and criticism on a later date, and therefore it's very important in government that you go through these processes rightly. But now that the processes have been laid down very clearly, we should accelerate the process.
Let me come specifically to the targets of disinvestment which need to be completed, like Air India, for example. Are we really, are we being realistic about completing it, considering that entire sector, the aviation sector, has been so badly hit by COVID-19?
Yeah, not only Air India, but also BPCL, also Concor, also BML. All these should be done with during this course of the present financial year. There's no doubt about it. And to my mind, the target of 1,70,000 crores is very much achievable and very much doable.
And lastly, Mr. Kant, could there have been more for the middle income taxpayer, the salaried taxpayer in this budget, where there has been no reprieve in a year when incomes have been lost, jobs have been lost?
Yeah, but a lot has been done in terms of, you look at the fine print of the budget. Actually, a lot has been done in terms of on the agriculture side, on the manufacturing side, in terms of the education side, on the health side. I mean, these are sectors which will give you huge spin-off to the common man. What more can be done than if your focus is on education and health and nutrition?